Thor, the Dark World in 3D. Made 2 years after the first Thor movie, we find ourselves in a much bigger and more elaborate world with the 3D beautifully ramped up to match. And one of the least expected ways I noticed how the 3D stereo conversion had progressed was with the indoor shots, when we are inside a room. Back in the 2011 movie, rooms in general tended to feel more like a backdrop. Here, not so. We always get the sense of being inside something. We feel the shape of the space, and the entire frame feels like it has some kind of stereo identity. One area where this really comes alive is in this abandoned building scene. Here, it almost feels like they're showing off this new era of 3D conversion as they playfully drop things that fly directly into the camera. It's overall a great stereo location with large, blocky concrete slabs that easily display their Lego-like 3D shape. In similar fashion, we also get this neat moment with 2 huge slabs separated by some unknown force. 3D loves small, tight spaces, and the stereo here really shines a light on the weirdness of the moment. Also, this Venom-like creature gives great strands of 3D spaghetti for our eyes to play with. There's lots of fun stuff to see in this movie. It's also worth pointing out that the conversion has matured to give us stereo-accurate reflections on shiny floors. One of those things that isn't always obvious, but looks cool when you focus on it. We get a few of those portals to another world showing up, and I wonder, is this the first time we see portals in a Marvel movie? Portals can look terrific in 3D, almost similar to how mirrors can feel like looking into a different world. But here we don't often get a strong sense of being able to look into them. Some shots give us a little more depth than others, but overall I was actually kind of surprised that they often seem just like colored discs hovering in the air, and not so much as something that you can fall into. Now, this isn't nearly as deep and refined as what we will see in the next installment of Thor, but it is somewhat comparable to a lot of the Marvel that has been coming out lately, which is a bit unfortunate to see the 3D process regress a bit, but that is a complaint for another movie. This, in its day, was top of the line and remains an enjoyable 3D watch that doesn't feel like they compromised in any way. Story-wise, on first watch, this movie felt like being abducted by aliens. Hours of my life were missing, and I had no idea why. To explain, at any given moment I felt that something important was happening, but I am not confident I could have articulated what exactly that thing was. Not a complaint, however. I enjoyed it, and I think it was rather brilliant in its execution. What struck me is that, like all Marvel movies, was preposterous, contrived, tended to develop out of nowhere, has everyone drop neatly into place with exactly what happens to be needed for that moment. I'd say this is as dumb as Love and Thunder, but Dark World gets away with it because it manages to maintain its suspension of disbelief. It does this by having the characters take the story, what there is of it, seriously. Thor is serious, Odin is serious, scientists are serious, and the enemies are deadly serious. The characters are never not serious, and audiences take on the attitudes of the main character. If the characters believe, then we too believe. Here in Dark World, we are led to believe in the dread, horror, and mad panic of the moment, and these emotions lend themselves to a tunnel vision that ignores all the little details. The only comic relief is Quarantined, with the relatively minor characters of Jane's friends, and this was a good call, as in science fiction, humor is a bit like fire. You don't want to let it loose, or it tends to burn the movie to the ground. On a second watch, I realized that Dark World also works as something of an allegory of addiction recovery. You'll have to hear me out for a moment. We got a girl possessed. Perhaps the venom thing represents her drug, and the closest thing she has to family intervenes and puts her up in a walled-off institution. This process takes her to something of a mental wasteland, where it painfully gets ripped from her. But doesn't make her free. The effects continue to follow when she leaves this place, and the struggle is ultimately not with the demon itself, but in recognizing and closing the portals, the windows, the opportunities for it to come back. This whole thing, from a certain perspective, could be Thor's public service announcement.